Going live on Restream right now. Chris Ransom, I'm joined by Brian Rago and Joey, my co-host over on TalkShoe. We were just talking about the Trevor Lawrence contract, and I want to get into your thoughts on this and where do you think this is headed? I know Jordan Love, if he has another signature year with the Packers, he's certainly going to be in this conversation next year if he's not in it already, because I think that Packers gave him an extra year when extending him last year.
Right. I think it'll make his value go up. I think Jordan's done more for the Packers in his 1 year than Trevor's done for the Jaguars. So, I mean, it's only right that I think Jordan's the next highly paid quarterback in the NFL.
And you can make an argument for Tua, but you can also make just as big of an argument that he's a product of his weapons. As good as he was at Alabama, you can also make that argument because of he has Hill and Waddle. It's just effortless for him at times because of that.
Yeah, and then you look at Jordan Love, and he's making his stats with people that, I mean, Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, and I mean a whole list of characters. You know what I'm saying? Not just one or two superstars. They're all on the rookie contract, making a big impact.
Exactly.
So, I mean, and then you add Josh Jacobs and you get, Marshawn Lloyd, and it's just going to be a crazy year for the Packers, I think.
I agree with that. Joey, what are your thoughts on what Lawrence's contract is and Jordan Love and what he's done, some of these contracts coming up?
Stuff for him they didn't do for Aaron Rodgers. You can also say he did what he did last year with Aaron Rodgers' first crew, with his last crew with the Green Bay Packers, with very little changes last year. So you can go either way depending on what you think of this year's draft. The thought process is, if he did what Aaron Rodgers couldn't do with that crew, because Aaron Rodgers getting up there in age, he turns 41 in December, then you can legitimately argue that Jordan Love will be the highest paid player in the NFL after this season.
For sure.
And it's interesting because you look at the Packers, they've got a lot of guys in rookie deals, and the chemistry they're building, it's just unreal. I mean, I had them going 9-8. I tried to tell Joey because, I mean, Joey's been to some Jaguars games in person. I went to the 2020 Senior Bowl, had the pleasure of interviewing Jordan Love. I told you this. I thought Love was going to break out, and the media was sleeping on him big time last year after Aaron Rodgers left. And that Aaron Rodgers leaving sort of overshadowed the way Jordan Love had been developing with Green Bay, and that showed. And I love the Packers' strength of schedule last year. I love their strength of schedule this year. And if some of those corners that Detroit drafted, like Carlton Davis, who they got in a trade with Tampa, and Terry and Arnold don't step up, the Packers could easily take this division from Detroit if Arnold does not have an instant impact right out of the gate. Because the talent's there for Green Bay to do big things. It's just a matter of execution and putting everything together in the first-year defensive coordinator. It's not going to be easy, but the talent's there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they got hoping they got a healthy Eric Stokes coming back. They got Carrington Valentine. I mean, they got Jair. They got Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard. I mean, the defense is there to put a pop on somebody and make a name for themselves again. I think I had a podcast yesterday with somebody, and he was saying that this new defense that we're seeing is out there to not be the passive team we've seen in the past, or the team to be out there and go there and smack somebody in the mouth, and not be afraid of what's going to happen, what people perceive them as. Just go out there and make a name for yourself.
Any response to that, Joey? Sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off, man. It's just I want everybody to be communicating, take turns speaking, and since I think Brian just made a case for how the Packers can challenge the Lions with guys like Eric Stokes coming back, Gary, Preston Smith, Kenny Clark. The Packers just have a lot of talent. I know they're moving to a 43 defense. They have a new coordinator. There is somewhat of a transition, but at the same time, the talent's there. If the moves Detroit made at cornerback backfire and they're still a bottom 5 pass defense, the talent is there. Brian, what are your thoughts on what were you asking, Joey? I'm just trying to repeat what you said to Brian.
Couldn't quite hear what he said.
All right. I'm going to move the laptop that Joey's speaking in sideways towards the audio on my laptop and see if this helps. Do you want to try to repeat your question for Brian? He couldn't hear you. But because I heard you, but I forgot what you said. And it's like, I mean, you can roast me for that, but at the same time, Brian couldn't quite hear what you said. So could you please re-ask our guest what you were going to ask him, Joey? I think his audio's turned off by accident. I'm not sure. I didn't mute him. So it's weird. It's just So, Joey, what was your question for Brian again? Because your audio just I think you know what? We're gonna pivot. We're gonna pivot into this division, the rookie quarterbacks, because we got to have some conversations. And yeah, I can hear you now. Brian couldn't hear your question. Do you want to ask him again? All right, Brian, is the Packers pass rush as good as advertised? I would say yeah, because you do have Lucas Van Ness entering year 2 as a number 3 pass rusher. And even though he's good enough to start now, it's like he's getting that treatment where he's getting eased in like Gary did when you had Smith and when you had both Za'Darius and Preston Smith. Packers are taking the exact same approach with Van Ness.
I mean, I think it's going to be better. I mean, you're going to have Quay Walker in his 3rd year. You got Edgerrin Cooper. If you have Rashawn Gary going down, the 4-point stance or whatever, like he was at Michigan, I mean, I think the new coordinator is going to make a big change in our defense. I think we're going to have a lot more blitz happy. I think he's seen that with the safeties that we drafted. It's just going to be a new look defense, I think, and they're going to get to the quarterback quick, I think. But yeah, I think they're going to be better than they were last year, for sure.
Yeah, because I'm kind of the same thinking. I know they have a new defensive coordinator from college, but even though that may be a transitionary period the first month of the season, they're going to figure things out eventually. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Packers are one of the more dangerous under-the-radar teams. You look at where they're at, and you look at where the rest of this division's at. The Bears, the Vikings, they're only going to be as good as their quarterbacks, how Caleb develops, how McCarthy develops. I don't expect either one of those teams to contend this year. But if both quarterbacks have success right out of the gate, then maybe you're looking at a scenario where the Bears and Vikings are the challengers to a team like San Francisco for the last wild card. And then you have the Bears and Vikings at 8 and 9. But that's a best case scenario if both rookie QBs take off right out of the gate. And I don't necessarily believe that'll end up happening, Brian. It could, but I think it's unlikely to happen. I think at least one of those two QBs will have growing pains, the rookie.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb, he has the weapons, but you got to invest in the offensive line too. You can't be throwing passes out, when you're getting sacked in the backfield. That's how I look at the Bears.
Yep. I do like a lot of what the Bears have done on defense the last 2 drafts. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like if they take a leap, it's going to be next season. And that's if they win enough games this year to keep Eberflus from getting fired and he actually shows steady improvement. Like if they go 8 and 9 or 9 and 8, and Eberflus does just enough to save his job and they stick with the coaching staff they have, I feel like they could take a leap next season. But it's going to be a 2025, 2026 type thing rather than it's going to be kind of like the Jaguars when they had Peterson and Lawrence in year 1 and Lawrence was in year 2. If the Bears take a leap, it's going to be like that, and it's going to be closer to 2025, 2026 as far as the timeline goes, Brian. I don't see the Bears doing anything substantial this upcoming season.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for, I think, for a rookie.
I do think they're heading in the right direction, but again, I feel like the Lions, this will be their peak year. Then they'll lose their coordinators if they get to the Super Bowl instead of Green Bay. But there's also the possibility Green Bay gets there. I could see Philly there because Philly has a really easy strength of schedule. They could get the 1 seed again. But I also feel like the Packers could go into Philly and beat the Eagles. If they're the 6th seed and they end up playing the Rams and winning that, I could see them beating the Eagles, which would set up a Lions-Packers NFC title. But for me, I think the Packers and the Lions are the 2 best teams in the conference this year, and Joey seems to agree with me on that notion.
Yep. Yeah, I see.
I can definitely agree with that because look at the Bears. I know we all talked them up, but they had some very serious issues. Yes, I think they may have gotten away with quarterback, but their offensive line still needs work. The defense is still a work in progress because they keep switching out pieces. They're still 1 to 2 years away, where I think the Packers are easily the best in that division.
Yeah. What's your response to that?
I mean, I see Packers, Lions, Vikings, Bears in the North. I just don't think a rookie being thrown in to starting job. I mean, Chicago has a history of wrecking their quarterbacks.
That's true.
I mean, it's right. It's obvious. It's happened with Justin Fields. It's going to happen, I think, with Caleb Williams, especially if they don't improve their offensive line. I mean, okay, so Caleb Williams has a bad rookie year, then they get rid of their offensive staff. Then what are they going to do? Start over with new staff and a new quarterback to them? It's just going to keep on recycling itself. It's just going to happen year after year after year. You can have all the talent in the world at receiver, but if you don't have a quarterback that's staying on his feet, it does no good. It's just a waste of money.
Yeah. I've got Lions at 12-5, Packers at 11-6. I've got the Vikings at 8-9, finishing 8th in the NFC, and I've got the Bears at 8-9, finishing 9th in the NFC, with both the 49ers going 9-8, getting the last wild card, and I've got the Vikings and Bears both going 8-9. But due to the tiebreakers, the Bears go 2-4 in the North, the Vikings go 3-3 in the North. The Vikings win that tiebreaker, but both teams finish 8-9.
Right.
And
I don't know.
Both McCarthy and Williams develop and have success as a rookie. They'll both have growing pains, but they both also might have moments of success due to their supporting casts being strong.
Right.
He actually got mentioned in OTA. So I think it's going to be a big adjustment for him. If it's already shown, it's going to be a big adjustment for him.
The only reason I'm giving Caleb the benefit of the doubt is because he has the Seahawks offensive coordinator. I mean, NFL coaches thought so highly of Caleb Williams that Geno Smith's three-time offensive coordinator, Geno Smith's see the last 2 years, left Seattle to go to Chicago to coach Caleb Williams. He left Geno for Caleb. That should say a lot about Caleb. But at the same time, I mean, he's struggled in OTAs. He's had some good moments in OTAs, but he's also had some moments where he's gotten benched. He goes into a bar, nodding his head up, dancing when some teammates are singing "The Packers suck," blah blah blah, and he's nodding his head up like he's having a good time. And when Gary hits him, he's gonna get that welcome to the league VIP treatment from the Packers pass rush. It's like they're not gonna take lightly to that.
It's.
Yeah. I kind of agree. And, I'm looking at, I do think Caleb will get it figured out, but I think it's going to be, his timeline is going to be similar to Trevor Lawrence's, where he goes through growing pains as a rookie, and then he figures things out down the stretch. in like November, December of 2025, right as the Bears new stadium gets underway for construction. That's sort of when he's going to take off, assuming you keep the OC around and you don't blow the team up. If you keep firing coordinators, Caleb won't take off. But knowing the Bears, knowing their track record with coordinators, it's not great, but maybe Caleb's the guy. We'll see. But there's just as much to be discouraged about as there is to be encouraged about. And that's the thing that worries me with both McCarthy and Caleb entering this division. With Love, with Jared Goff.
A quick pace game for them. They're going to have to learn the game fast.
Yeah. I really like the Jordan Morgan pick for the Packers. What did you think of the Packers 2024 draft? What they did? Because I think you had me on before the 2024 draft to talk about some of the Packers, what they could do, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm super happy. They got Jordan Morgan. Hopefully he eventually takes over, the left tackle position. They got, Adrian Cooper, fast-paced, smash mouth, rushing linebacker. I like Marshawn Lloyd as a running back too, as Jacobs' backup. I think they're going to put Dylan in fullback packages to pass block for Jordan Love in the backfield. I mean, the safeties they got, I think they got them to fit the new defensive scheme. They're going to have them blitzing a lot after the quarterback. I think we're going to see a whole new Packers team that we haven't seen in a long time. A new look, so to say. You got Devontae Wyatt. I think he's going to have a big year. Kenny Clark always has a huge year. I just think our defense is going to have an imprint on the season big time.
Yeah. Because you got some guys, Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark. I think those guys will probably play inside at 43 DT, and it's going to be hard to game plan those guys. You're going to still have some of your 34 defensive ends like Colby Wooten and Carl Brooks in depth roles too. So I think the front seven, even though you're pivoting to a 43, you still have the personnel at edge rusher and interior to be a force. And Preston Smith's probably going to play weak side linebacker, I would think, but if he could also play defensive end at edge rusher. But either way, I think the Packers have stability at linebacker because even though you lost Devondre Campbell, you have Quay Walker. I think Edgerrin Cooper was drafted by Green Bay in the second round. I know a lot of Packers fans were thrilled with the inside linebacker they got in the second round. I believe that's Edgerrin Cooper. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me on that.
No, you're right.
All right. So I think Cooper's going to be a day one starter, and you're going to have Quay Walker move to weak side because Walker played weak side and inside at Georgia. Go ahead, Joey. I know you got something you want to say.
man, I got it. As a former left tackle, I know that if I say I got you, and I got you, the quarterback can do whatever they want. But nobody's going to get through there. And I think Jordan Morgan is that guy on a professional level that says, I got you. And Jordan's going to sit back there and go. And I felt that way before the draft. I knew he wasn't going to go to the second round, but I totally thought he was the first round pick. So I really love this pick. And I really think he's going to be the left tackle for the next 10 years for Green Bay.
I agree.
Yeah, Morgan, I think, is going to be a cornerstone player. I agree with you, Joey. Jordan Morgan is going to be a cornerstone player for the Packers.
What do you think of the Javon Bullard?
Bullard was another guy I liked. Bullard, I think, could be a day one starter at strong safety, because it just depends on what you have. Landon Collins, but you do need a safety next to Landon Collins. I think Bullard, McKinney. Yeah, I meant McKinney. They both went to Alabama. I just had brain fog. I'm sorry about that. But yeah,
no worries.
The Giants 2020 second round pick. But yeah, McKinney and Bullard are both going to be day one starters. I think Marshawn Lloyd's got a chance to develop into a change of pace back. I love the Tyron Hopper pick. I think that's a perfect depth player for Quay Walker, because Hopper was a weak side linebacker. You're moving to a 43. If Quay Walker can't put it together this year, I really like the value in that pick. And I think the best day three pick, I think if there's a day one starter in day three, there's a few guys you can look at. You can look at Kalen King, but he's probably a number 4, number 5 corner for depth. I would say the guy who is the Jacob Monk out of Duke, a guy Joey liked. If Josh Myers is in a contract year and Jacob Monk played center at Duke, so it's possible if Myers just really struggles in training camp and Monk dominates, or if Myers gets injured in a contract year, we could see a situation where Monk ends up winning the starting center job and runs with it. So looking at the day 3 picks, I think Jacob Monk probably is the best chance to be a day 1 starter. But I could also see Pratt beating out Sean Clifford for the backup job. And I could see Kalen King getting playing time if multiple corners are injured. But with all the depth the Packers have with they have Carrington Valentine, last year's second round pick. You have Corey Ballantyne as your number 4 corner. You also have the don't they have another corner that was a team captain last year? I forget. Not Jair Alexander. They have another corner. Not Jair, not Stokes. They have another corner who was a team captain last year. I believe he's in a contract year. Or maybe the Packers let him walk. Yeah, because Keyshawn Nixon. They still have Nixon. He's a nickel. But they've got Valentine and Valentine. So they're 5 deep at corner at least. And then you sort of have Robert Rochelle, who got cut by the Rams and Panthers, and Kalen King, essentially competing for that last cornerback spot, because there's 8 corners in the Packers depth chart. Actually 9, but I realistically only see 5 or 6 making the final roster. And I think Zion Gilbert's probably going to get cut, even though he's listed as the backup nickel to Nixon. I think Gilbert will get cut in camp. And I think that number 6 competition's basically between Rochelle and Kalen King. And if Kalen King doesn't win it, he'll start out on the practice squad. If he does win it, Rochelle will get cut in training camp. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yep.
I think we're in agreement on that, Brian and Joey.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these safeties they drafted, they're going to have for special teams, just get down that field and make that stop.
Because Oladipo and Evan Williams are both listed as backup safeties on the depth chart right now. But if they don't develop and Anthony Johnson Jr. continues to improve, he could win one of the backup jobs, and one of those safeties could start out on 3rd string. So, yeah, that's a great point as well. Joey, what are your thoughts on that?
Along with the Browns.
Yep.
You can't argue good competition. That's going to make everybody better, you know?
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Iron sharpens iron.
Exactly.
Well, it's nothing but looking good for Green Bay on defense, in my eyes. When you have, your number 7 through your number 3 corners battling it out for starting spots, you're in a good spot.
And let's not forget that in the NFL these days, it may list starting corners, but they're going to be starting free. They're going to have that guy either in the slot or back in the nickel or somewhere. You're going to have that third corner in there. So you're really battling for three starting spots.
Agreed.
I think the Packers are in a very good position getting a very good third starting corner in this situation.
Agreed. Packers are gonna have a lot of cornerback depth. You can make an argument the Lions are more top heavy with better starters, but I also think the Packers' depth is superior to the Lions as far as their cornerback room goes. Their depth at the cornerback position is vastly superior, in my opinion. That applause sounds like agreement on Brian's end.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, the depth in corner is huge, and they have depth in their whole roster.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joey.
Brian, would you say the Packers cornerback group in the NFC?
Do I think their cornerback room was what? I didn't hear the last part.
Are they the deepest cornerback group in the NFC?
Are the Packers the deepest cornerback room in the NFC? I'd say they're the deepest in the NFC North. I'm not willing to go as far as to say they're the deepest in the conference. I mean, I think you can make an argument for the Eagles if Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean both pan out this year. But I do think the Packers are definitely in the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFC conference, if that's what you're getting at, Joey. I would actually argue that after the Packers, the deepest cornerback room in that division is the Bears. But I think the Lions have more star power than the Bears and their top 2 or 3 corners with Carlton Davis, with Terry and Arnold and Brian Branch at nickel. I would argue the Lions have more star power at corner than the Bears, but the Bears with Jalen Johnson, with Kyler Gordon, Tyreek Stevenson, and some of the depth guys they have at corner, I think you can make an argument that the Bears are deeper than the Lions. But at the same token, they don't have the star power.
Yeah, I agree.
I have to go with that argument that I think the Packers have more depth. They don't have to look around and think of the depth. He looks like
Yeah. No, because there's just I'm just trying to think outside of maybe the Eagles, who have Slay, Bradbury, Quinion Mitchell, who's replacing Avant, and Cooper DeJean. Who else in the NFC is 4 deep at cornerback right now, Joey? I mean, I do like what the Vikings have. They have Andrew Booth as their number 4 corner, but I also feel like they don't have an impact corner outside of Byron Murphy. And you can also make the argument that Byron Murphy's the weakest number 1 corner in this division. Jalen Johnson was number 1 on Pro Football Focus last year. Jair Alexander, he's a leader for a good reason, still on the team that drafted him for good reason. You could also make the argument that Carlton Davis was a nice addition for the Lions. So as much as I like Byron Murphy, he did miss the second half of the season with injuries, and I think you can make, even though he's a good number one corner, I think you can make an argument he's the weakest number one in the division. So, and there's really not that established number two next to him. I like Mekhi Blackman. He did well as a rookie, but he's got to build on that. And I do like the corner out of Missouri, Caleb Evans at nickel, and I like Booth as a number 4, but I mean, right now, looking at these cornerback rooms in the NFC, I would have to say the Packers and Eagles are the two deepest from what I've seen in the NFC. I don't really know if there's another team. I'm not going to count the Vikings as a team that's 4 deep at corner because I'm not sure how their pass rush is going to match up with the other teams in this division because the corners might do their job, but the pass rush not being quick enough may give the quarterback enough time to pick their pass defense apart. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the Lions have Melifonwu and Joseph. They did have C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Tracy Walker, but they released those two because Melifonwu and Joseph, both on rookie deals, played well down the stretch. The Lions also brought back Emmanuel Mosley on a team-friendly deal. They brought back Amik Robertson. They drafted Enos Rakestraw in the second round. So if Rakestraw develops and Robertson and Mosley stays healthy, that's the big thing to look at. Because if Mosley stays healthy, he is the number 4 corner on this roster. And right now, Amik Robertson's the number 5 corner, but I could see Rakestraw taking that number 5 corner job from him in camp. So I would put the Lions at 3 in terms of cornerback depth behind the Eagles and Packers. But I think the Lions have the best pass rush of those 3 with Hutchinson, or at least the biggest star. And they do have a good, really deep front 7, added Davenport, Ollie McNeil, and DJ Reader from the Bengals on that interior. I think the Lions front 7, as well as their top 2 safeties, sort of alleviates the fact that their cornerback depth is somewhat lackluster compared to the Eagles and Packers. Having good safeties and really good starters in the front 7 sort of alleviates some of those issues, and having both coordinators back as well.
Yeah.
But if we're just talking cornerback rooms in the NFC, I think it's the Packers at 1, and then you can make a case for the Lions or Eagles at 2. Maybe the Bears. But, I like Dallas, but the thing is Diggs and Bland both have to be healthy for them to be in this discussion.
Yeah. And the Packers torched the Cowboys last year.
Yeah, in the playoffs with Diggs out of the lineup.
Yep.
I think the Commanders' secondary is slowly improving, but is it going to improve enough? I would say no, because there's uncertainty at left tackle. There's uncertainty at edge rusher, even though you drafted Jane Daniels at 2. There's just that uncertainty. And that's really what concerns me with Washington right now. And it's interesting because the Bears have Seattle's offensive coordinator. The Commanders have Kingsbury, and the Patriots have Alex Van Pelt. I think all of the top 3 picks are in good positions with their offensive coordinators. So we'll see what happens and how these rookies develop. Because I think this is the first time in a while where you could certainly make an argument that Jane Daniels or Drake May has less upside than Baker Mayfield. But at the same token, we talked about this off the air, Joey. The rookies in the 2018 draft had horrible coaching at the time, whereas the top 3 picks in this year's draft all come into excellent offensive coordinator situations. The Bears have the Seahawks offensive coordinator, the Commanders have Kingsbury for Jane Daniels, and the Patriots have Alex Van Pelt for Drake May. Heck, even Bo Nix has Sean Payton. Atlanta's got Penix to learn under Cousins. And McCarthy's going to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. So all of the rookie quarterbacks in this draft, say what you want about them, say what you want, whether they're reaches, whether they're busts. All of the rookies in this year's draft have much better coordinator situations compared to 2018 when we were discussing some of the previous draft classes and how we'd rank them off the air.
The basics of what a quarterback should be. So he is a guy I loved. I thought he was great for the Browns for what they were. I thought he was great as a quarterback coach before that because of what he stood for. I think that what he represents is time sensitive. I don't think it can go more than 3 or 4 years. It's just, in a way, it's outdated. But in that time, I think he is the best, if not the best, one of the best people in the NFL, whether it be from quarterback coach or coordinator, for putting people in the best position to compete, for teaching the fundamentals, for getting people where they need to be, for getting the footwork where it needs to be. And for Greg May, I think that is the perfect guy to oversee his initial training. So for that, I think it was just a perfect fit for Greg May, the Patriots, and for Van Pelt.
Exactly. As far as let's do something fun here. We'll go over the Packers regular season schedule. I'm gonna ask Brian what he thinks is gonna happen in each game, and I'll keep track of his record versus our record, and then we'll just have some fun with that, and then we'll wrap this up because I feel like Brian's done a good job answering most of our questions, most of our concerns with the Packers, and I kind of want to see where he has the Packers. First game's in Brazil against the Eagles. Do you think the Packers win that game, or do you think they get off to an 0-1 start? Because I feel like that's kind of a coin flip game. That could go either way.
I don't know. There seems to be a lot of Packers fans in Brazil, so I'm going to go with the Packers. I think they're going to stun the Eagles.
Good point. Next game, the Packers play the Colts at home. I've got them winning that one, and I've got them seeing the Titans the following week in Tennessee and the Vikings at home. So I have the Packers. I think if they beat the Eagles in Brazil, you're looking at them being 4-0 entering week 5 against the Rams. Now, I do have the Rams winning in week 5, but I have the Packers getting their revenge in the playoffs. So
yeah, it's going to be – I have the Packers losing to the Rams. It's one of those games that you don't know, but you kind of have a feeling the Rams are going to win. Obviously, I want the Packers to win every game, but, it ain't going to happen. It's the NFL, so.
Yeah, and I really like what the Rams did in their draft. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk. I know they lost Aaron Donald, Joey, but they managed to capitalize with 2 impact players. They still have Kobe Turner. I think the Rams' defense is going to be better at edge rusher with Verse. Even though they lost Darnold, and that is a huge chink in the armor, I think the additions of Verse and Fisk give the Rams the advantage here because I think both of those draft picks are going to have strong rookie years, Joey. That's just my 2 cents, my personal opinion. But, yeah, I do have the Packers Yeah, but I had a blue chip grade on Verse. Number 1 edge rusher in the draft for me. And Fisk was my number 2 interior player behind Jerzon Newton. I had Fisk graded ahead of Byron Murphy, who went to Seattle at 16. So I think the Rams are going to be the class of the NFC West next year. That's They've got a defensive rookie of the year nominee in Kobe Turner, and they've also got another guy in Fisk. So I think they're going to be better despite his loss. I know that sounds kind of bold considering Donald was such a perennial all pro, but that's just how I feel. I go based on projections when watching tape of college athletes, and it's not always a seamless transition you think it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a seamless transition for Versk and Fisk, and the fact that they were teammates at Florida State, I think only but yeah, Brian's got the Packers at 4-1. They probably rebound against Arizona in week 6 at home.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Rams hit on their first 2 draft picks. That's why I'm higher on the Rams than the consensus. But the Packers, they're tough test. They do have to face the Texans at home, and they got to play the Jaguars on the road. I think they beat the Jaguars on the road, but their only home loss of the year comes to the Texans in week 7. I mean, it'd be great if the Packers started 7-1. But realistically, they're going to be 6-2. They're probably going to either lose the Jaguars in Jacksonville or the Texans at home if we're really putting stock into it, Brian. But I do have them beating the Lions in week 9 before the bye week. So I've got Green Bay at 6-3, but I'm guessing you have the Packers at 7-2 entering the bye week.
Yeah. I have them losing to the Texans, but I have them winning the next 2 games.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that as well.
I will say that Jacksonville has last year they usually won 12 games. This year I think they're a little bit better, but I also think there are more question marks this year than there were last year. I think they've got a lot to prove because they did screw it up. They screwed it up bad last year. So I do think that they're going to be a little more competitive, and I think this is going to be a really competitive game. If Trevor Lawrence lives up to his contract, which is he's not the highest paid player in the NFL, this could be a freaking shootout between the highest paid player in the NFL and the future highest paid player in the NFL. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out.
Yeah. And then you look at the bye week. Brian's got the Packers at 7-2. Playoff predictors showing ads here. Now I got to reload the site because. All right, so the Packers, they head to Chicago in week 11. Honestly, this could go either way. Packers should win this game, but if Caleb actually gets his head out of the gutter and focuses, they do have a chance to steal. But I mean, I took the Bears, but it's mainly a shock value play. I do expect the Packers to be favored, and they should win this game because if they do, they're 8-2 on the year. I know Brian's going to take the Packers. I do think. I think it's going to be interesting because I really do like the Bears defense, but at the same token, Jordan Love does have Chicago's number. So I'm guessing this is going to be, and then you get San Francisco at home and the Dolphins at home. I'm guessing both of those are going to be wins. all of those are going to be wins, and the Packers are going to be 10-2 entering Detroit on Thanksgiving, which will probably be their third loss of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got the Niners starting 0-3. I've got the 49ers losing to the Jets at home. I've got them losing to the Vikings because this is a spite game for Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, he does this early in the year. Whenever he plays a former opponent, he tries his best to beat that opponent just to spite the team that let him go. So I think Sam Darnold has a spite game in week 2 where he goes off and he beats the Niners, and then he plays like crap the rest of the year until McCarthy comes in. But I do think he beats the Niners just to spite them. Short week, got to go to Minnesota. I think the Vikings upset the Niners, and I've got the Rams beating San Francisco in week 3 in LA. So I have the Niners starting 0-3, but I do have them making the playoffs at 9-8 as a wild card. So I don't think the Niners are in contention for that number 1 seed because that's a tough opening. Jets on Monday Night Football, Vikings with Sam Darnold, spite game, Rams on the road. 49ers could be. That's just a tough 3-game stretch. I don't think Sam Darnold's reliable, but at the same time, I feel like if he's going to play out of his mind for 1 week, it's going to be against the Niners in week 2. Just to say, you should have kept me, Kyle Shanahan, He's just going to have that moment because he did have some promising moments against the Ravens last year when Purdy got benched in the Christmas Eve game or the New Year's Eve game, I believe. Yeah, but it's going to be like he's going to make the right throws and find a way to beat the Niners. And instead of seeing ghosts, he's going to see he's going to see Justin Jefferson and some receivers, but it's going to look like virtual reality. It's going to look like purple holograms with the virtual reality, Joey. I'm not saying you're wrong on the ghosts, but he's going to see some purple people eater ghosts, and he's going to throw to those purple ghosts, and it's actually going to work out for him, and it's going to look like Sam Darnold's wearing those augmented reality glasses. I don't think Sam Darnold's going to do well, but here's the thing. You play Daniel Jones in week 1. I think the Giants win that, but that's a very uninspiring week 1 matchup. And then the Vikings, they get the Niners in week 2. I think Sam Darnold's going to try to stick it to the 49ers, and he's actually going to get a win against his former team. He knows that locker room. He knows the offense they like to run. I think the Vikings are going to surprise people in week 2 on a short week. And then everything's going to go to hell when the Vikings host the Texans. They travel to Green Bay. The Jets come to Minnesota in week 5 with Aaron Rodgers. And then the bye week happens in week 6. And then after those 3 bad games by Darnold, after 2 good games, I think the Vikings pivot to McCarthy for week 7 when the Lions head to Minnesota. And I think McCarthy beats the Lions in a trap game in week 7 in his first start, fresh off the bye week. That's one of my upsets I have early in the year. But that's kind of my timeline for McCarthy. I think he starts by week 7, but Darnold wins the job in training camp. And after 2 really good weeks against the Giants and 49ers, he plays like crap against the Texans, Packers, and Jets. Like, I could see him throwing 7 or 12 interceptions in those 3 starts, Joey. That's how bad I expect Darnold to be against the Texans, Packers, and Jets. That I think the over-under for interceptions needs to at least be 6.5 minimum. We do got to get back to the Packers. As fun as this rant has been, we got to get back to the Packers. But yeah, Brian's. All right.
because the Packers are going to be the class. So I'm not sure.
I've got the Vikings beating both Minnesota and Green Bay at home. I've got the Vikings winning against everyone in this division at home with McCarthy down the stretch. I've got the Vikings going 3-3. I've got the Bears going 2-4, beating Minnesota and Green Bay at home, but they could easily end up being 7-10 and 1-5 in the division with a home win against the Vikings as their only win. The Bears could be that brutal, which is what Brian expects, what you probably expect as well from the Bears. But I could see the Vikings finishing 8-9, going 3-3 in the division with 3 home wins against each of the teams in the North if McCarthy shines like I think he will.
Thinking that the Packers game would be McCarthy's welcome to the NFL game.
That's only if Darnold plays like crap against both the Giants and the 49ers, which I'm not banking on him to do. You're banking on him to do that, but I think he plays well the first 2 weeks, and then he plays like crap after that. Because I just think throwing a rookie on the road against a division rival is not a smart idea. I mean, you look at what the Minnesota Wild did with Jesper Wallstedt, their 2021 first-round pick. They had him make his NHL debut against the Dallas Stars, the best team in the Central Division, and he gave up 7 goals in his first NHL start. Even Fleury, who's a veteran goalie, said he looked kind of nervous, and it's like, if you put McCarthy in as a starter against the Packers, that's the type of rough outing you're going to get from McCarthy, the kind of outing where Wallstedt gave up 7 goals as a goalie in his NHL debut. You're looking at a debut where McCarthy potentially gets sacked 7 times and he throws 3 interceptions, maybe 1 touchdown at the end in garbage time. That's kind of what I'm looking at if you start McCarthy against the Packers. Whereas if you start him against the Lions at home, he'll have the crowd on his side. He'll be a little bit eased into things and he'll be in a better position to succeed, to jumpstart that confidence. You know, I know the rookie's got to play at some point, but it's like, you know, Brian, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it'd be smart to sit McCarthy behind Darnold, and then once Darnold, you know, has that atrocious game, give the rookie a chance and see what he's got.
Because Joey and I agree that Darnold's going to play his way out of the job. What we disagree on is when he's going to play his way out of the job. I think there's an outside chance he beats the Giants because the Giants secondary is awful. Outside of Deontay Banks, their 2023 first round pick, their secondary is brutal. So I think Darnold actually has a good week 1, and I think he has a good spike game against the Niners, but then I could see him throwing 6 to 12 picks in that 3-week span against the Texans, Packers, and Jets. That's just a brutal 3-game stretch for Darnold. And the bye weeks in week 6, and then you'd have 2 weeks to prepare McCarthy for the Lions at home in week 7, which is probably the best time to put McCarthy in, if we're being honest, in my opinion.
Yeah, just to see what he's got and work on it in the offseason and come back stronger with him next year.
Yeah.
You know, definitely. I think you got to give him a shot and you got to see what he's got before you make the ultimate decision, you know.
And I think week 7's the right timeline because I know the Patriots are looking at week 8 with Drake May against the Jets at home. That's probably the best time to start May. And if May continues to dominate, that timeline's going to get sped up, Joey, especially if Brissett struggles in the regular season. That timeline will get sped up to like week 4 if May does well in the preseason. But that's another topic for another day. Let's get back to the Packers. Brian does have them at 7-2. He had them at 7-2 entering the bye. Then he's got them beating Chicago, San Francisco, Miami, 10-2. They probably lose to Detroit to fall to 10-3. But the final 4 games, you've got Packers at Seattle versus New Orleans at home, at Minnesota, and versus Chicago. And I'm guessing you're going to have the Packers finishing 13-4 with either a road loss to Seattle or Minnesota. Just unsure which one. I gave the Vikings an upset win in week 17. But again, it depends.
I was thinking 13-4, 12-5, somewhere in that area. I just don't know where those last loss or 2 losses come from. Either the Saints, Vikings, maybe the Seahawks. I mean, it's a toss up because you're at the end of the year where some teams are playing for nothing, some teams are playing for a lot, and you just don't know who it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So 13-4, 12-5 is where I'm standing with the Packers.
If San Francisco beats them, or if Chicago somehow gets lucky against the Packers, which is really bold of me. I don't think most fans have the Packers sweeping the Bears. Let's be real. That should remain the narrative, especially if you're a Packers fan. But yeah, Joey, what are your thoughts on Brian's projection for the Packers 12-5, 13-4?
One of them is those involved the Packers and Browns. It is one scenario that I have looked at of two teams that they do have a lot of doubters, but at the same time have a lot of upside. Looks good to easily lead around the divisional round. And so I did not see 13 wins, all 13 wins, not out of their own possibility for the Packers. The Packers are an incredibly talented team. If their pass rush and receivers come in as advertised, and some of the better receivers and pass rushers in the NFC, then we can be looking at the Packers running the 49ers in the NFC this year.
Yep. I'm in agreement on that, Joey. I mean, just looking at just where Packers are, I think we're going to see, and I think next year we could see the NFC, if both Caleb Williams and McCarthy pan out, I could see the NFC North getting to the point where it's as competitive as the AFC North. But I think we're a year away from that. We're looking at that as that's going to be like 25, 26. That's when we're going to start to see that happen, where it's that competitive. It's not going to be that competitive right out of the gate this year, as much as you'd like it to be.
Because the AFC North is like we saw last year, they're going to beat the hell out of each other and whoever survives wins. Whereas the NFC, I think, is going to be more of an offensive game. It's an outdoor game. And that's going to be the sense of who will be the best there. And I think in that case, the Packers are in a really good spot to win because I think they, maybe not this year, but next year, have a, depending on how they draft next year, could have a very good case for the best offense, not only in the NFC North, but the entire NFC, if they don't have that case this year already.
Yeah. I'm in agreement with you on that. And Brian, what are your thoughts? Where would you rank the Packers? Because I look at the NFC this year, I really only see 3 Super Bowl contenders in the Eagles, Lions, and Rams. Lions, Eagles, Packers. You could put the Rams in the discussion as that 4th team, but I think they're a tier below the Lions, Eagles, and Packers as far as this season goes. I mean, the Cowboys they could get the NFC South champion and get to the divisional round, but they'd be the weakest of the 4. You could say the same about the Rams. You could say the same about San Francisco, but with Greenlaw tearing his ACL in the Super Bowl, probably out for the year, them bringing in Devondre Campbell, I feel like the Niners are going to have a Super Bowl hangover. They're going to take a step back this year. tough strength of schedule. Still a playoff team, but they did move on from Steve Wilkes. I think that's a much bigger loss than you're making it out to be, Joey. I still like the Niners as a wild card, but I think they finished second to the Rams. I would not be surprised if they finished third in the division, assuming Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison just dominate right out of the gate like Burrow and Chase did in year 2. That's a big if, though, Joey, and I'm not banking on that. But if that were to happen, I could see San Francisco dropping even further all the way down from first to third. I'm not banking on that to happen, but if that crazy scenario came to fruition, I'm just saying, look out. I don't think that happens, but I'm not ruling it out either. And this year, it's been much quieter compared to last year as far as like key players getting injured. There have been a few season-ending injuries, like Drew Sanders, 2023 third round pick. There have been a few season-ending injuries. And, the Patriots left guard from Chattanooga's out until week 8, Cole Strange. But, like, it's been a much quieter offseason as far as, like, injuries and news compared to last year. It has. Let's be real, Joey. It'll heat up when training camp starts, Brian, but I think you're in agreement with me. It's been a much quieter offseason so far compared to last
for sure. You haven't heard much of anything really going on as far as injuries.
Yeah, Joey. What were you going to add? Yeah. I agree.
I mean, I heard you talk about the 3 months, but what was he saying as far as we've all seen it? I couldn't quite hear that part.
I was saying it's like he has as much potential as anybody to be a top 5 quarterback, and I'm excited about the next 3 months and seeing how he progresses.
Oh yeah, for sure. He has the whole locker room behind him. You had these top tier free agents coming to Green Bay to play because they both mentioned him as part of the reason why they wanted to come to Green Bay. And, he's not playing favorites. He's just going to throw it to the guy that's open. He's not going to, throw it to a triple covered Devontae Adams or a double covered Alan Lazard. He's going to be top 5 for sure, I think. And just to see him progress is just going to be awesome. In my eyes, for sure. Yep.
The first couple of years, and now I'm here. So I'm really excited to see, what he has coming in, because he has made some of the most rapid progress in his first year as a starter, I've seen a long time. And I'm excited to see where I go.
Right. And I think that people were so caught up in hearing what the media had to say about Aaron Rodgers that they put Jordan Love in the backseat, not really discussing him that much. They wanted to get the clicks and they wanted to get whatever. And all of a sudden, it's like we kind of knew the pattern in Green Bay on how they developed their quarterbacks. So, you know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden, boom, here he is. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, we kind of knew he was going to be somewhat good because he was behind Aaron Rodgers, but the media had nothing to talk about but Aaron Rodgers. So we didn't really hear anything about Jordan Love.
Yep.
So one thing that I can say as a Browns fan, I can 100% say the mainstream media, they don't know half of what the people in local media know. And I can guarantee you, I pay more attention to local media than anything else. And I understand how the mainstream media is supposed to get up to date with everything. And I've listened to the Packers podcast. He get ready to go. And I can understand any frustration with the national media, because national media is always slow to catch on. And it is frustrating as hell.
Yeah.
So I can definitely get, sympathize with any national media issue. And your love in the national media has been, I think the national media says he's great. I also think the national media says he's bad. And I've seen local media like, look, here's his progression, and here's the honest truth about it. So that's what it is. But I think the local media's got it right.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that has it right. Jordan Love is, he's an unfinished product, but he's damn well on his way.
Yep, he's a good one for sure.
Agreed. I think it's going to be a very interesting to see how this plays out with everything going on in the NFL this upcoming season.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stories. The rebuild in Green Bay, is it still getting rebuilt? I don't know. Depends on who you ask, I guess. You know?
I agree. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how things unfold. And the reason I'm typing on my phone is I'm gathering research because the season finale for Draft Utopia on July 20th, we're going to be ranking every draft class over the last 10 years in the NFL, NHL, MLB, MLS, and NBA drafts from 1 to 5. And I'm just getting my research. But the NFL is king, and if you want further proof, the NFL ended up finishing number 1 5. It ended up finishing number 1 6, 7 times over a 10-year stretch. And I think it finished 5th only once in 2015 for me. And it finished number 2 other years within that 10-year span as far as just the overall strength. And I think you can make an argument for the 2022 NFL draft or the 2021 NFL draft, which came second. I ranked the 2022 NHL draft above the NFL and the 2021 NBA draft above the NFL because of the margin. Like 16 of the top 20 picks in the 2021 NBA draft look like impact players, whereas only 12 of the top 25 picks in the NFL draft look like stars right now. But there's also 14 second round picks that look like they're going to be impact players, potential stars. And the 2021 NBA draft was a very weak second round. So Joey can make that counter argument for the NFL over the NBA, whereas the NFL and NHL drafts for 2022 both have 16 out of 20 players projected, 16 of the top 20 projected to be in the NFL, NHL as impact players next year. So that's why it's sort of like splitting hairs. And I thought the 22 NHL draft was a little deeper than the NFL. But again, that's splitting hairs, and Joey and I will have that conversation debate in a few weeks. But this is why the NFL is king, guys. With all the talent coming in, with all the value you get outside the first round, there's a reason the NFL is king, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
Because Winston was never a liability, but he was never an asset either, because the touchdowns he threw canceled out the interceptions by the time he broke out. So you're talking about Winston, correct? Jameis Winston? Yeah. It's hard to say, because I don't think you can call him a bust, but at the same time, you can't call him a success either, because he's been on multiple teams now. He was on the Buccaneers. He's on the Saints. This is his third team. So, I mean, he's not a bust, because if you can make it in the league for about 10 years and you're a starter for 4 or 5 of those years before things turn over to Brady, I would say 2015, 16, 17, 18, and 19, he's a starter for 5 years. And then the last 2 or 3 years, he's been the backup quarterback, whether it's the backup to Drew Brees, the backup to Derek Carr. He's the backup. And now he's heading to Cleveland, and he's the backup to Watson. And it's possible if Watson doesn't get it together this year, I don't think Watson's going to get benched. But, if Watson gets injured again, it's possible we see a Jameis Winston resurgence in Cleveland, and that would open the possibility for him to be a spot starter somewhere else with how pedestrian this 2025 QB draft looks. And it sucks because he's got a very cerebral mind, very high football IQ, but he's been the least successful of the 4 number 1 picks in the 2015 draft, which is going to be the big talking point I'm going to hit home during the season finale on July 20th. I'm not going to go in depth with that right now, but I pointed out off the air of the number 1 picks: Kyle Laren, Dansby Swanson, Karl Anthony Towns, Connor McDavid. Jameis Winston's the least successful of those 5 number 1 picks from NFL to MLS. He just is. And if you throw Joel Lloyd from the WNBA draft into that conversation, he's number 6. And that doesn't mean Winston sucks. It just means he's the least successful of those number 1 picks.
Right.
You hate it as an NFL fan. Admit it. You hate the fact that the number 1 pick is the least successful as an NFL fan, you hate that the number 1 pick in the NFL draft is the least successful of the 6 athletes. You hate that as a football fan. Just admit it, buddy. Because he took Florida State to a national title as a freshman redshirt, and then he got them to the first college football playoff unbeaten season. And really, Florida State hasn't really been able to match the level of success they've had with Winston until this past year. And even then, they got screwed out of the playoff because Jordan Travis got injured. No, because the Buccaneers' thought process was Marcus Mariota is going to be a 2-year project for our system. Winston's going to be a day one starter, and he's going to have immediate success. And to be fair, the Buccaneers' thought process wasn't wrong on Mariota, but the thing is, he was a 2-year floor player, not a 2-year project, a 2-year floor player. So they had the right idea when they thought Winston's ceiling was higher. They did. The Buccaneers did. I'll admit that firsthand. And Mariota fans can counter-argue that he's had more opportunities to start, and that's true, but he kind of got that second chance handed to him because he was so promising in relief of Carr one year when Carr was injured. And he... Winston had 3 different head coaches. That's the other thing too, Joe. He had Lovie Smith his rookie year, and then the offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, came in, took over as the head coach for Lovie Smith, and then he hires Todd Monken as his offensive coordinator. And Cutter, we go from Cutter calling the plays for Winston to Todd Monken calling the plays for Winston, and Winston settling in under Todd Monken. And then we go for Bruce Arians, but Arians hated the 30 touchdown, 30 interception season. Tom Brady comes in, even though the Buccaneers went 9-7 and barely missed the playoffs. And the rest is history. So... And Winston dominates like Flacco did. I do think he will be a spot starter somewhere in 2025. I do. Because this Kobe draft next year does not look good to me. I would rather have Winston as a spot starter than draft a QB in 2025. I agree. I just don't know what team he would end up on. If I had to take a guess, I'd say the Raiders. But again, it just comes down to the record. It just comes down to what teams have familiarity with Winston to where they would say, you know what, let's give this guy a shot. Let's bring this guy in and give him a shot. I'm just curious who that team would be. I know the Titans comes to mind. I don't trust Will Levis. That I could see the Titans, but I could also see the Titans drafting a QB. I could see the Raiders. I could see the Broncos. There were rumors the Broncos wanted Winston. Darnold and Winston were the Broncos' top two choices to be a stopgap at quarterback. But they ended up settling on Zach Wilson, their third choice, because the Vikings wanted Zach Wilson and Darnold. They wanted both of those QBs, but they were like, you know what, we'll just draft our QB, and the Broncos end up trading for Zach Wilson. So, and they end up settling for less than what they wanted. Yeah, you have. I remember our very first podcast, Joey, where you raved about Winston during the podcast, his growth, his maturity, his development, how he handled everything off the field leading up to the draft. I know you've documented that very well. If you go back to the oldest episodes on TalkShoe when Joey started in 2014, 2015, I think there's some episodes of January 2015 that are still up on TalkShoe. If you go back and check those out, you'll see all of the Jameis Winston rants that Joey had from his inception into the NFL to where he is now. But again, I'm just trying to think, where would the market be for him if he's going to get a shot? I could definitely see Sean Payton giving him a shot, because Sean Payton wanted him as a spot starter this year, and the Browns offered him more than what the Broncos were willing to pay him. So all right. I don't want to turn this into a Winston rant. We got to talk about some other stuff here before Brian and I sign off. But what do you think? What backup do you think is going to play their way into a starting job next year? Joey's going with Winston. I could see Winston. I think there's some other guys in the market. Maybe if Mason Rudolph comes in, turns things around with the Titans. If Brissett does well this year, he could end up as a spot starter somewhere else. There's just a lot of scenarios. But what borderline starter or backup QB do you think plays their way into a starting job next year before we sign off? You've got Flacco with the Colts, Minshew with the Raiders. There's a lot of possibilities to explore there. That is my final question for you, and then we'll sign off, because that just seems like the perfect way to wrap this up.
That's a really good question. I like Minshew with the Raiders.
Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see him coming in for Aiden O'Connell, because I've got the Raiders starting 0-4, but I think I have them finishing like 7-10 or 8-9. So I could definitely, if that happens, I could definitely see Minshew playing his way into a starting job. Why don't you tell us about the Cheez Talk podcast and where people can find your work, and we'll call this a day.
On Twitter or X, you can find me at Cheez Talk _pod. Cheese is spelled with a Z. Just general sports talk, Packers, sports, life. This doesn't have to be Packers if you're not a Packers fan. Talk about your team, talk about whatever. And I ask a bunch of random questions about your life, and just to get people to get to know you. Just like to be a positive person and, spread positivity, I guess, Huge Packers fan, love cheese. I don't know.
Yeah, Joey, do you want to you want to promote your book? I mean, you are coming up with a new science fiction book. Do you want to promote that briefly here before we sign off? If you don't, I'll just end the show on TalkShoe and Restream, but I will give you the opportunity to promote that since you've worked really hard on it, man. I'm proud of you. First book, big step. Yeah, and
Okay, no mention of COVID. No mention of COVID. That was one of the questions I got. You know, none of that. So we're looking time travel, well-made adventure. If you want dinosaurs, we got some raptors going on. So Shadow Force, Dawn of Legacy, Joseph W. Potter, available at the Kindle store and wherever Kindle is made.
thank you, Joey, on Kindle. And here's another I don't know if you'd be cool with this, but I do have a Patreon account, and I don't ask for anything. If people want to donate, great, and if they don't, that's fine too. But if people donate, they get to choose what film cuts I upload to the YouTube channel. That's one of the perks. I'm going to throw in, I think if anybody gives over $20, I throw in something from the Teespring store for free, and I ship it directly to them. If anybody gives out $40, $50 donation on Patreon, if I set one up, the offer I'd make to Joey is I'd give him half of that, and you get a copy of the book in that bundle as well. But I'm not asking for anything. If Joey declines, that's the end of it. I'm not going to ask again. And I trust his ability to make money off this book as an entrepreneur. And if he wants to do this on his own, more power to him. I respect that, because it's like you're trying to get your name out there. I mean, you don't have to decide now. It's something to think about, consider, because I do need to update the Patreon account for Draft Utopia, and that is a good incentive. It's like if somebody donates $40 a month, I pay Joey $20, and I throw in a copy of his book, and if someone donates $50, maybe they get an autographed copy. Maybe that's the incentive for marketing your book, because I know Joey doesn't want to autograph every book, but if someone's willing to donate $50 and I throw in an extra $5 for that book to Joey, he'd probably be willing to autograph that book under that condition, that circumstance. It's not something you have to decide on now, but it is food for thought, something to consider off the air. On your publishing license, your publishing company may not allow that. And if they don't, we're not going to have this discussion again. I'm going to make sure to forget this conversation ever took place. That's what I'm telling you right now, man to man.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of red tape. And one of my buddies told me orange tape.
Because you don't want to get oil or pastel paint on the tape, the red tape or the orange tape. You don't want to get like purple pastel paint on the orange tape. And it makes the investigation and the ethics of the publishing companies very murky, very confusing. You just want to avoid that at all costs. But yes, thank you for promoting Shadow Force. And
Right now I'm using it for promotional avenues, and
yeah, we'll see. Exactly. This is something we got to think about off the air. This is not something I expect a decision on today, but I appreciate you promoting your book. I appreciate Brian promoting his Twitter handle and coming on as today's guest. I heard the dog wants something to say. I think the dog said go Packers. So we're just going to roll with that and we'll let Brian tend to his pet here as we sign off. So thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back next Saturday, Joey. See ya.
See ya.